Hey, welcome back, Knicks fans. I just wanted to get into this real quick. There's a little controversy created by Al Harrington. He went on some guy's podcast talking about how he can bust Willis Reed's ass, and so we're just kind of gonna get into it. But first of all, I know a lot of these guys are just trying to. I think it's possible is because these are very smart individuals. They have podcasts and their platforms, and it could just be clickbait. It could just be trying to attract attention, and I get it. However, he did make these statements, and I find it pretty disrespectful. I feel like a lot of the younger players, the guys that played in the 90s, and actually not even really the 90s, I feel like it was the guys that played in the 2000s for the most part, and until now, I don't know why they think they're better than the guys that played in the 60s and 70s. And it's first of all, you didn't play in that time frame, so you couldn't even really know. But a lot of these guys that do most of the talking are even just like average Joes, right? And so it doesn't even make any sense why they would even compare themselves to like all-time greats. Al Harrington says he can bust Willis Reed's ass, and Willis Reed is an all-time great, one of the 50 greatest players of all time. So it's a little crazy. So we'll get into it. How we're gonna go through this? We're gonna do like go through kind of like a profile for both players, basketball IQ. Then we're going to look at equipment, and after that, we'll take a look at the stats, right? And so we're going to make this real quick. Try to see if we can make quick work of this, so we can get back to the rest of our day. And without further ado, before I get into it, please, everyone, please like and subscribe, and also comment below. I'll be more than happy to respond to your comments. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds so you can basically like and also subscribe. You guys like and subscribe yet? Did you subscribe yet? I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So let's get into it, right? So we're going to first start with like the physical profile. We have here an image of Al Harrington here on the left, Willis Reed on the right. You just like look at the physical profile for both players right off the back. You look and you will say, okay, Willis Reed looks like he might be in better shape. He's definitely a strong dude, pretty big dude. And look who's he playing against. This right here is probably the greatest players of all time, Wilt Chamberlain right here. And look who Al Harrington is going up against right here. I think this is Hibbert right here. So first of all, so that's first thing right off the bat, right? Is like where you took, and I've seen both players play. I don't know why Al Harrington thinks I forgot that he played for the Knicks. Try to watch some of those Al Harrington Knicks teams. They were very difficult to watch. He wasn't a very good defender. He has some good scoring games, but those are very difficult teams to watch. So I don't even know why he thinks he's as good as he is. Uh, Willis Reed, I haven't seen enough of him play, but I've seen some games of him. And these are games when he's basically down the stretch of his career, like a few years before he retired. I watched some of the games from like the 72-73 finals against the Lakers when he took the Lakers out like in 5 games. And we're talking about the Lakers with Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West, right? They took them out like in 5 games. And Willis Reed played excellent in that series, and so very smart play, very cerebral. But in terms of physique, watching those games, I can clearly tell you Willis Reed was faster and stronger than Al Harrington. It wasn't even close. So I'm not even sure what Al Harrington was talking about. Let me let you guys know. Let's just kind of talk. Let me give you a list of some of the All Stars that Willis Reed played against in his time. Bill Russell, Dave Collins, Jerry Lucas, Will Chamberlain, Artis Gilmore, Bob Pettit, Wes Unseld. Those are some of the These are some of the guys he had to face off against during his career. I don't know who Al Harrington faced off against. He did face off against some really good talented players. Don't get me wrong, but Willis Reed was not only able to hold his own, he actually beat these guys in a lot of these games and won a couple of chips against two of the all-time greatest players. Against Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain. So and Al Harrington couldn't even get his team into the playoffs. So that's the physical fitness is out of the way, right? That goes to Willis Reed. It's not even close. We're talking about basketball IQ. Now that Willis Reed team, it actually reminds me of Steph Curry's Golden State Warriors, especially the one prior to Kevin Durant, where it's like they had lineups where it was like they can all dribble, pass, and shoot from the perimeter. I mean, that was similar to the New York Knicks, and these guys were very smart. The Golden State Warriors, they were a very small ball club. They know how to play basketball. That's the thing with the Warriors. They were coached very well. They were taught very well, and they knew how to play basketball. And that New York Knicks team really knew how to play basketball. They abused the Lakers. It wasn't really just talent. They were just a much more smarter and more well put together team because they could all dribble, pass, and shoot. Perfect example. That 72-73 finals, Willis Reed basically was playing from the perimeter end because Wilt Chamberlain could not play him on the perimeter. And so a lot of times the Lakers would have to switch, right? And every time the Lakers would switch, he would abuse the Lakers. Either he would take advantage of the mismatches. He would constantly shoot over the smaller people that would switch onto him because Wilt Chamberlain did not want to come onto the perimeter. A lot of times they didn't have any choice but to bring Wilt Chamberlain out to the perimeter. Willis Reed stretched five before the word was even made up. So I don't know what Al Harrington was even talking about. He was a much better shooter than Al Harrington was from the perimeter, much more consistent shooter from the perimeter than Al Harrington was. He could put the ball on the floor. He was a three-level scorer. Well, it wasn't three levels because there wasn't a three-point line back then. But he can take you from the perimeter, and he can put the ball on the floor and get to the hole, and he can post you up. I guess in that sense, you can call it three-level if you want to. So I'm not even sure what Al Harrington is talking about, and he could not even convert with the same efficiency that Willis Reed could, right? And so in terms of basketball IQ, it just wasn't even close. So the other thing I remember, like even Willis Reed, they were doing even that in that final was like he would constantly run down the court as quickly as he could. Every time when he got the rebound, the purpose he was trying to beat Will Chamberlain down the court, right? So there'll have to be a rotation. Either so they'll try to help or they'll switch on to him or whatever. But there was always a man open on the perimeter. And because that whole team, because they can shoot, he was just picking them apart. He would just find an open man in the perimeter and they'll just hit the shot. That team, they had Walt Clyde Frazier, Bill Bradley, it was Willis Reed, Earl the Pearl. Earl the Pearl had like some crazy range. He was out there just lighting them up, especially from the baseline. So, same thing for Walt Clyde. Walt Clyde was able to shoot from the perimeter. And so, but that whole team was very cerebral, and Willis Reed was the leader. He was the captain of that team. And so, a lot of those guys, they saw the way Willis Reed played, and they took their cue from Willis Reed. When it comes to leadership, the rest of the followers, all the other guys, the teammates are always going to take their cues from the leader, and they're always going to emulate the leader. So they all tend to behave the same way. They all tend to buy into the culture. That's what happens. And so, Willis Reed basically beat beat all-time greatest players in for the championship twice, and Al Harrington couldn't even get into the playoffs with the Knicks. So that's all said there. We're going to look at equipment, very small look at it. Like look at Al Harrington. He's got a lot of protective equipment. He got knee pads, right? Something to kind of help him with his knee. And look at that shoe. The most important thing was the shoe. Look at that shoe right there. And look at Willis Reed's shoe. Willis Reed and Wilt Chamberlain, they were in Chuck Taylors. Chuck Taylors is essentially hard rubber with jeans that are glued to it. So they glue some jeans to a piece of hard rubber, and that's what they have to run up and down the court in. I've played basketball in Chuck Taylors. Don't ask me why, but I have in the 90s when I was younger. And I had to wear those for a few years, and those things are terrible for your feet. It gives you calluses, it messes up your feet. I mean, like really bad calluses, right? It doesn't have very good protection for your ankles, Al Harrington is running in, like the sneakers he's running in is like feathers. It gives him, the sneakers Al Harrington has is supposed to give him an edge, is actually better than Willis Reed's sneaker. And with that gap in equipment, Al Harrington has much better equipment, and still, there's no way he can even come close to Willis Reed, right? Imagine if Willis Reed basically had that same sneaker. And so a lot of guys, they kind of talk crazy, act like these guys aren't like athletic and all. They're running in Chuck Taylors. And then the other thing too, these guys, they play kind of funny. They didn't know how to cross over. Back then, like you guys carry, like a lot of the reason why they didn't carry back then was because the coaches didn't allow them to do it. That's not how they were trained and brought up. Those guys wanted to cross over back then. The crossovers, they had those. They just didn't do it because, number one, the coaches didn't allow them to do it. And number two, it's very difficult to cross over without carrying. And so the chances are you're going to get called for a carry. or palming or whatever it is. Look at a game these days, the way these guys are playing. These guys are constantly palming the ball. I've seen the game in person. And when you go to watch these games in person, you will be surprised. It is insane how much these guys carry the ball. You know, they can't. I mean, they don't even call it. I mean, I guess they can't call it because it's like everybody's doing it. And they do it all day, especially the guards. And so, because these guys like they're not constantly jumping and dunking back then, they could do it if they want. But they just didn't do it because it was just it wasn't a part of the game. It just wasn't how they were trained, and it wasn't good for their health to be jumping, like, especially jumping to dunk the ball all the time. It just wasn't even really necessary, to tell you the truth, right? And so that's pretty much it for that. We're going to get directly into the stats now. And so you look at these stats: 19 points per game, 32 rebounds, 48% shooting. Not even close. This is extremely efficient right here. This signifies 19 points per game, 13 rebounds on 47.5% shooting. That's above average. These are averages here for basically um, for great basketball players, legends right here, right? Especially the 13 rebounds a game for a whole career, 19 points a game and 13 rebounds. And he could have averaged more points. Like I told you, he can shoot from the outside, put the ball on the floor. He just was a very good, consummate team player. It wasn't about getting his points. It was about getting the win. It was about making sure, like they hit the open man, whether if it's like a layup or an open jump shot. That's just what it was back then. And so you can't compare. It's not even a close comparison. And you compare it to Al Harrington's. He averaged 13 and a half points, 6 rebounds, and 44% shooting. Everything that's here on Al Harrington suggests he's just an average player. The field goal percentage is slightly below league average or around league average, so that he's average. And then he averaged about 13 and a half points per game, and then 6 rebounds per game. That wasn't exceptional. That was very average, right? And he's comparing himself to an all-time great. 6 rebounds versus 13 rebounds a game. So this guy had 13, basically averaged 7 more rebounds per game than you did. You were a very offensive-minded player. Always make sure you try to get yours. And he was a much more selfless team player, and he still averaged more points than you did, and with better efficiency. So I mean, the comparison is not even there. He was a better free throw shooter, right? PER, his PER was only 4 less than Willis Street, but guess what? The reason why it was 4 less is because they didn't count steals and blocks back then. The PER, I'm not sure how the PER is calculated. I know how PIE is calculated. I know with the PIE they do include they include steals and blocks in the calculation. But yeah, so they didn't keep. There was a lot of stats they weren't keeping back then, and so essentially, I'm not even sure what Al Harrington is thinking about here, but we all know. I think we kind of have an idea. Uh, it's just, I guess it's just clickbait. I guess that's just what he's trying to do. He's trying to get people to watch. Maybe he's auditioning for a show on ESPN or something. But I mean, I can't even really go any further with this, right? How much further can you really go? How much more analysis do you really need to compare both players? I mean, this was just such an easy one to shoot down, and you know what? It's unbelievable. And sometimes it does annoy me a little bit because it's just more, and it's like these average guys that come out and make these statements. Last time it was JJ Redick, it was just unbelievable some of the stuff that these guys are saying. Sometimes you just got to be quiet, especially with other errors. You didn't play in that area. I don't even think these guys watch these games. If Al Harrington actually honestly watched Willis Reed's some of these old Knicks games, I don't think he would honestly make that statement. I think he would honestly, I would hope he would realize that, like, how foolish his statement is, because it wasn't even close, right? It's not even a comparison. You're talking about kind of like a guy who went for his versus like a team player who was very selfless with the game, one of the ultimate team players of all time, and yet, he still was able to average more points than he did. Clearly, averaged way more rebounds, more than doubled them up on rebounds, and then was a much more efficient player. So it just what else can you say, right? It's crazy. And he was even the guy's podcast he was on, just a different story. I don't even want to get into what he has to say, what into that guy even say his name. He's also, I find him kind of, a lot of these guys are kind of pretty disrespectful. And you know what's crazy? These guys are the guys that played like in the 2000s. You know, some of these guys are very disrespectful. I know the one I'm going to speak, his name is Steven Jackson. He basically, he went in and walked Clyde Frazier. I think it was a couple of years ago, and it was like totally unnecessary. What Clyde Frazier made a comment. It was his opinion on a certain player, and basically Steven Jackson then goes in and starts talking about the guy's clothes and his suit, and like the lack of respect that you have for your elders. And see, that's the thing is like it kind of shows you something. It shows you a lot about some of these young players, especially Steven Jackson. Like he's just a disrespectful ass. You know, it's like it just shows you. It shows you all you need to know about the kind of person he is to make that statement and to go in the way he did on an elder. You know, just the lack of respect. Some of these guys. I'm not going to say all of them are like that, but some of these guys clearly don't have respect for the elders, for the people that basically set the foundation for them and pave the road for them. But they don't really excuse me. But they don't really, you know. It feels like they don't know their history very well, and they definitely don't respect their history. Maybe because they don't know it and they don't care to know it. So it is what it is. But that's different from Al Harrington. I don't know Al Harrington very much in terms of he hasn't really, aside from this, I haven't heard him say anything like really disrespectful. Because what Al Harrington, like I said, let me just say again, I, I felt like what he said is, in terms of comparing basketball, it is borderline disrespectful in terms of comparing himself to the player, right? In terms of an athletic standpoint, right? But it's not like, disrespectful, like, oh, he demeaned him as a person or as a man. So I'm not going at it like that. Al Harrington, I've never known him to be that kind of person. I've never heard him say anything crazy about anyone. Like I said, I think he might just be making his comments because he could be trying to, maybe he's doing it for a platform, right? And and maybe he's auditioning to be on either Fox Sports or even on ESPN. So you never know. So I'm not trying to compare. I'm not trying to say Al Harrington is in the same wavelength as Steven Jackson. I don't know Al Harrington that well to even say that, and I've never heard anything from Al Harrington that was like really really disrespectful. It could just be kind of competitiveness, So it is what it is. But let me know what you guys think. Please like, subscribe. I'll be more than happy to comment below, respond to your comments. Have a good day.